Now that we know a little bit about sampling distributions, we want to know whether or not we can use those sampling distributions to make conclusions and how confident we can be in our answers when we try to generalize. Now that has to do with the shape, center, and spread of our distributions. First, we'll take a look at center. If our centers are the same, when we compare our sampling distribution to our population distribution, that would be something that's unbiased. But if our centers are different, that would mean that they are biased. So let's go back to that example with the red and the blue from the previous video, where we knew to begin with that half were red and half were blue. And then we took many samples of size 20 and we wanted to compare that. Notice that in our sampling distribution, the center was pretty close to 0.5. And that means that this was an unbiased estimator because we got the same result from our sampling distribution as what we would have expected based on our population. Moving on from center, now we'll move to variability or spread. And the more compact our distribution is, the better. So we don't want to see a huge spread because that makes our conclusions a little bit less reliable. We want to see a smaller spread. One way to get a smaller spread or less variability is to increase sample size. So you can look at these two histograms and you can see that the one where we took samples of size 100, that had a much wider spread. They went from 0 to about 0.52, whereas the kind of coral color, that was where we had samples of size 1,000, and they went from proportions of 0.31 to 0.43. So they're much tighter together. Now, in an earlier unit, in chapter 6 actually, I guess we talked about the importance of the 10% condition, where if we were sampling without replacement, we wanted to make sure that our sample size was no more than 10% of the total population size. That's actually what is making this variability much smaller. As long as we're meeting that condition, then we're going to be able to make good conclusions based on that data. Lastly, kind of looking at how bias and variability relate to each other. You may have seen a diagram like this in a science class when you were talking about accuracy and precision. That's very much the same thing as bias and variability. So your accuracy relates to whether or not there's bias. If you have low accuracy, you also have higher bias, whereas the variability relates to your precision. If you have higher precision, you have lower variability. So you can maybe relate that to something that you've already seen before in your science class.